Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. This is a report from the United Nations, and one of the things is the world must steer humanity to a path in harmony with the planet. And this is a message from the Secretary General of the United Nations. That a lot of the problems that we're seeing with climate change and the heat waves, the forest fires, the flooding, the melting of polar ice, a lot of it can be slowed down if humanity works with nature instead of working against nature. That we do the right things to lower emissions and to control the warming of the planet to be within 1.5 degrees Celsius. And he's making this announcement as they're headed into COP27, and there are a lot of things that he said that need to happen along the lines of plastics, protecting species, things like that. So we're going to listen to that as part of the United Nations statement. And towards the end, the last segment, we're going to hear about children who were involved in war. They were forced to be combatants. They were kidnapped, or whatever the situation was that put them into harm's way, handed guns, and told to either fight or be shot themselves. The person giving the report to the UN Security Council is going to make some recommendations and talk about some programs especially in Africa, that will help rehabilitate these children and help give them safe havens so that they don't wind up in this situation to begin with. It is an important issue that in the Western world, in North America and most of Europe, that our children are allowed to be children until almost the age of between 18 and 21. That is not always the case in other parts of the world. That children are forced out of childhood before they even get to become teenagers. So listen closely to the last segment, especially about children and war. So let's move forward as we listen to Antonio Guterres as he gives his talk about what we need to do to, as humanity, to be in sync with our planet.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome this timely event. A healthy planet is the foundation for human well-being, sustainable development, and long-term prosperity. But nature and its benefits are deteriorating worldwide. We face a triple crisis of climate disruption, biodiversity loss, and pollution. 1 million species of plants and animals are threatened with extinction, threatening the livelihood of millions. The global food system is a primary driver of this loss. 3/4 of the land and 2/3 of the ocean are adversely impacted by human activity. Some 3 billion people are affected by land degradation. Our ways of life based on producing, consuming, discarding and polluting have brought us to this dire state of affairs. But since human activities are at the root of this planetary emergency, that means we also hold the key to the solutions. Now is the time to transform our relationship with nature and chart a new path. Key milestones lie ahead of us this year where we can and must deliver. Above all, we must limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. At the COP27 climate conference in Egypt, we need commitments that will deliver a reduction of emissions by 45% by 2030 so we can reach net zero emissions by mid-century. Current national commitments point to an increase of almost 14% this decade. That spells catastrophe. Second, we must halt and reverse nature loss. At the COP15 Biodiversity Conference in Montreal, we need a bold global agreement that tackles the key drivers of biodiversity loss. We need to close the biodiversity finance gap of approximately $700 billion a year by 2030. And we must eliminate the annual $500 billion of harmful subsidies and redirect them towards incentivizing biodiversity-positive activities. We must protect and enhance nature's contributions to people. That means ensuring essential benefits for the most vulnerable and strengthening nature's capacity to protect communities from extreme weather events. Nature-based solutions, such as preserving mangroves, rainforests, and other essential ecosystems, are vital. Multilateralism can provide the answers we need. I welcome the recent declaration from the Lisbon Ocean Conference, and earlier this year, countries committed to forging an international legally binding agreement on plastic pollution by 2024. But we must avoid empty promises. We need to match commitments with credible and verifiable actions and the finance for implementation. Ultimately, our survival depends on it. Together, we can and must steer humanity to the path of living in harmony with the planet. Let us seize this moment for nature to do that. Thank you.
Okay, one more time. This morning, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, spoke on behalf of the Secretary General at the joint high-level dialogue on the Africa we want, reconfirming the development of Africa as a priority for the United Nations. She said that the United Nations shares the vision of the Africa we want as outlined in the African Union's Agenda 2063, which is that of a continent shaped by its own narrative, informed by its own citizens, and representing a dynamic force on the world stage. However, she said that Africa's development gains are at risk as a consequence of the current three ongoing crises: the pandemic, climate change, and the war in Ukraine. She outlined measures to tackle these in the region and underscored that the Africa we want is still within reach, but that to get there we need to change our mindsets and turn the triple crisis into an opportunity. The Secretary General today has announced Hamdi Ulukaya, founder and chief executive officer of Chobani, as a Sustainable Development Goals advocate. The Secretary General said that with the clock ticking and multiple crises driving us further off track, we must do everything in our power to deliver the SDGs. He said he was pleased to welcome Mr. Ulukaya into this group of advocates as an inspiring leader in business and humanitarian aid. Originally from Turkey, Hamdi Ulukaya is a businessman, activist, and philanthropist dedicated to the global integration of refugees and the accessibility of good quality food for all. His foundation, 10 Partnership for Refugees, mobilizes the private sector to provide economic opportunities to more than 25 million refugees worldwide. There's more in a press release. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan today released a report outlining the human rights situation in Afghanistan over the 10 months since the Taliban takeover. Despite an overall significant reduction in armed violence between mid-August 2021 and mid-June 2022, the UN mission recorded 2,106 civilian casualties, 700 killed, and 1,406 wounded. The report notes that the majority of civilian casualties were attributed to targeted attacks by the armed group self-identified as Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, Khorasan province, against ethnic and religious minority communities in places where they go to school, worship, and go about their daily lives. According to the report, while the de facto authorities have taken some steps seemingly aimed at the protection and promotion of human rights, such as the amnesty for former government officials and security force measures, the 3rd of December decree on women's rights, and a code of conduct relating to prisoners, they also bear responsibility for a broad range of human rights violations. The UN mission points out that the erosion of women's rights has been one of the most notable aspects of the de facto administration to date. The UN mission is also concerned about the impunity with which members of the de facto authorities appear to have carried out human rights violations. More information online. In Sudan, our humanitarian coordinator, Kardiata Lowenjai, said she is deeply concerned following the killings of dozens of civilians and the displacement of thousands of women and girls in a wave of recent intercommunal violence in Blue Nile State. She calls on all parties to stop the violence and to seek mutually acceptable solutions. Humanitarian workers have reached more than 560,000 people with assistance between January and March of this year in Blue Nile. Aid organizations are providing health and medical supplies as well as food and are being asked to expand the capacity of a field hospital to treat the injured. These latest clashes come at a time when humanitarian needs in Sudan are already at an all-time high. More than 14 million people currently require some form of life-saving aid. The 2022 Humanitarian Response Plan, which calls for $1.9 billion, is only 20% funded. The UN mission in the Central African Republic, MINUSCA, continues to work to protect civilians and to expel armed groups through its presence in several areas of the country. Over the past week, peacekeepers carried out a total of 1,191 patrols. The mission also reports that it reinforced its presence in Barao, which is in the Vakaga prefecture, as an early warning measure in response to rumors of violence. Today, in the presence of the Prime Minister and Health Minister of the Central African Republic, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Valentin Rugwabiza, donated 50,000 liters of fuel for use in 8 health centers to help with fuel shortages in the country. Izumi Nakamitsu, the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, today briefed the Security Council on the work being done by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to obtain the necessary information about Syria's chemical weapons program. She said that at this stage, because of gaps in emissions, the declaration submitted by the Syrians on the nation's chemical weapons program cannot be considered accurate and complete. The OPCW's work is ongoing. According to the first report by the World Health Organization on the health of refugees and migrants, millions of them around the world face poorer health outcomes than people in their host communities. Refugees and migrants are not inherently less healthy than host populations. It is rather the impact of the various suboptimal factors, such as education, income, housing, and access to services, compounded by linguistic, cultural, legal, and other barriers, and the interaction of these, that are behind poor health outcomes. In the report, WHO calls for urgent and collective action to ensure that refugees and migrants can access health care services that are sensitive to their needs. They say the report also illustrates the pressing need to address the root causes of ill health and to radically reorient health systems to respond to a world increasingly in motion. Today is International Moon Day, which marks the anniversary of the first landing by humans on the moon as part of the Apollo 11 lunar mission. And today is also World Chess Day, which recognizes the important role of the International Chess Federation in supporting international cooperation for chess activity and aiming to improve friendly harmony among all peoples of the world. The day also aims to provide an important platform to foster dialogue, solidarity, and a culture of peace. And on that note, yes, Edie.
Thank you very much, Farhan. 2 questions. First, President Erdogan of Turkey said today that Turkey wants to tie down Russia and Ukraine to a written agreement on a grain deal this week. Does the Secretary General have any comments on whether he believes this is possible this week?
I'm not going to comment on the possibility beyond the sort of indications you've already received from us in recent days. What I can tell you is that the Secretary General today currently is technically on annual leave, but all day he has been working the phones and making calls to different leaders about this particular topic, and I think he's trying to make as much progress as we can on this right now.
My second question is that the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, gave an interview to Russian media saying that Russia's military focus in Ukraine is no longer only in eastern Ukraine. He indicated that Moscow's strategy had changed after the West supplied Ukraine with longer-range weapons, and said that Russia would now have to push Ukrainian forces further from the front line to ensure its own security. Does the Secretary General have any comment on this more robust goal of the Russian Federation?
Regarding that, we have, from the start, been clear that this military offensive needs to stop. The Secretary General has been very clear about that, and I would like to point out that the General Assembly has also spoken out again as a group about the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and so that is the standpoint of the United Nations system as a whole. Sorry, Benno, and then James.
Thank you. I have a couple on Mali. The spokesperson from MINUSMA, Olivier Salgado, was declared a persona non grata today by the Malian government. Do you have any comment?
Yeah, I can say that we are aware of and deeply regret the decision of the authorities in Mali to request a staff member of the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali to leave the country within 72 hours. It is important to note that the doctrine of persona non grata does not apply to United Nations personnel and is contrary to obligations under the Charter of the United Nations, including those concerning the privileges and immunities of the UN and its personnel. MINUSMA and UN headquarters are taking appropriate measures to follow up with the relevant authorities on this matter.
So the Malian government explained their action with tweets by Mr. Salgado regarding the 49 Ivorian security personnel that were arrested, I think, like 10 days ago. Also, the Malian government asked you, the UN, to clarify the contractual relationship between the government of Germany and these Ivorians. Did you find out if there is any relationship?
I believe that these are things that are being looked into and clarified on the ground. I don't have anything further to say about the status of the Ivorians than what we've said previously.
Do you have any indication then from whom the Ivorian security people were hired and on what legal basis they were entering Mali?
These are not UN personnel, so I think that that's really a question to ask the Ivorians.
Okay. Just one last, and then I'm done. Sorry. Clearly, MINUSMA and the Malian government are on a collision course, and the situation becomes more tense by the week. Is there anything the UN plans to ease the situation? Are there travel plans from senior personnel or something like this?
I wouldn't characterize this as a collision course by any means. There have been different difficulties, but we've also been having a constructive dialogue with them on other issues. As you know, the Secretary General himself spoke last week with Colonel Goita, and other officials have been in dialogue with their Malian counterparts and will continue to be in dialogue. Yes, James.
So a couple of follow-ups. First on Mali. You say it's not a collision course, but they seem to be putting obstacles in your way nearly every single day. Does it not need a high-level UN visit? Does Mr. Lacroix need to go to Bamako urgently to try and sort this out? Or perhaps should there be a Security Council meeting, as it's the Security Council that gives the mission its mandate?
Well, we're looking into the issues that we've been facing at all levels, And both the UN mission, MINUSMA, and headquarters will take whatever steps we believe are necessary to help rectify the difficulties that have arisen in recent weeks.
One more follow-up. The Secretary General from his holiday is making calls on the grain deal. Who has the Secretary General been talking to?
That I cannot say.
Okay, and I have one other on a different subject, if I may, which is Turkish airstrikes have hit northern Iraq. According to the Iraqi authorities and the authorities in Iraqi Kurdistan, at least 9 people believed to be tourists have been killed in that region. What's the UN's reaction?
We're appalled by any actions that involve the killing of civilians, and it would need to be looked into. But certainly, we hope that all of them that there's no military activity that targets any civilians or civilian infrastructure.
And any involvement by the UN mission in Iraq?
I'm not aware that the UN mission in Iraq has been asked to look into this, but certainly we believe that this would be a case for authorities to investigate what has happened. Yes, Alan and then Gregory.
Thank you, Stefan. Farhan, I'm sorry. Automatically, I'm sorry. Apologies.
It's the backdrop.
Yeah. Yesterday, as far as I know, Russian First DPR Dmitry Polyansky submitted a letter to the ESG concerning the so-called website Mirotvorets, which I mentioned a couple of times in this room. The Ukrainian website which displays the personal data of people who are allegedly so-called allies of Russia. And Polyansky says that at least 327 children are listed in this, personal data of these 327 children are listed in this website. So according to the letter, Russia asks the ESG to help Ukrainian government to force the closure of this site, to force the Ukrainian government to close this site. Any reaction regarding that?
I could just confirm the receipt of the letter and that it will be studied. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Farhan. There is a report that today Ukrainian forces attacked a nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye region, which caused many casualties among the staff. So, do you have any comment on that?
I have no first-hand information on that. Yes, Mariam.
UN Security Council Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team report to UN Security Council and says that there are strong evidence that Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders are connected and they are communicating and advising. Al-Qaeda leaders are advising the Taliban right now, but they are not doing anything or they are not having any activity because they don't want the Taliban to look bad at this stage. Was the Secretary General actually did read this report, and does he have any opinion on this?
Well, certainly it's up. These are reports that are ultimately reviewed by the relevant sanctions committees, and so we'll await their review of these findings. Also,
the Taliban's spokesperson called the UNAMA's report, human rights report, a lie. Do you have anything on that?
No, we strongly support the work of our colleagues and the accuracy of their work. And with that, I will turn the floor over to the spokesperson for the President of the General Assembly, Paulina Kubiak.
I had a question, Farhan.
Again, please make sure to write all panelists so that everyone knows, so my colleagues can know that you're asking. But go right ahead.
All attendees, you guys have to choose less options, I guess. Just a quick question, a follow-up on Mali again. What does it mean? What does it mean, this expulsion of Olivier Salgado for the talks MINUSMA and Mali authorities were supposed to have about the rotation of troops? Has it been, the rotation of troops has been frozen? Has these talks started already, or have they not started yet?
They have not started yet. We're still awaiting those talks.
And who waits what? Have you proposed some dates? Have you proposed some
All I can say is,
something, or are you waiting for
all I
Mali
can-
government?
all I can say on that is we're ready for the talks to begin at any point. We need to have these discussions, and indeed, we believe we should have had this for some time now. Okay, Paulina, come on up.
President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I thank Council members for the opportunity to brief you again on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2118 on the elimination of the chemical weapons program of the Syrian Arab Republic. Since the last consideration of this matter by the Council, and consistent with established practice, the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs has been in regular contact with its counterparts at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, on its activities related to this matter. Mr. President, efforts by the OPCW Declaration Assessment Team, or DAT, to clarify all the outstanding issues regarding the initial declaration and subsequent declarations of the Syrian Arab Republic have not progressed since the Council last met on this issue. The OPCW Technical Secretariat has yet to receive the requested declaration from the Syrian Arab Republic on all undeclared types and quantities of nerve agents produced and or weaponized at the former Chemical Weapons Production Facility, or CWPF, that was declared by the Syrian Arab Republic as never having been used to produce and or weaponize chemical warfare agents. The OPCW Technical Secretariat also expects further information and documentation from the Syrian Arab Republic regarding damage caused during the 8th of June 2021 attack on the military facility housing a declared former CWPF. I have been advised that the Technical Secretariat has not yet received a response to the request for information regarding the unauthorized movement of and remains of 2 destroyed cylinders related to the chemical weapon incident that took place in Douma on 7th of April 2018. The Syrian Arab Republic must respond with urgency to the OPCW Technical Secretariat's request. I regret to inform Council members that the OPCW Technical Secretariat is still not in a position to conduct the 25th round of consultations in Damascus between the Syrian National Authority and the DAT due to the repeated refusal by the Syrian Arab Republic to issue an entry visa for the DAT's lead technical expert. Moreover, I have been advised that the Syrian National Authority has stated that the exclusion of the same DAT expert from a limited round of consultations in Beirut, as proposed by the OPCW Secretariat, is a condition for its participation in those consultations. Mr. President, I have been also advised that in response to the OPCW Technical Secretariat's note verbal dated 20 May 2022, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic sent a letter to the OPCW Director General on 31st of May 2022, agreeing that the OPCW Secretariat's proposal to address the shortcomings in the Syrian Arab Republic's initial declaration through exchange of correspondence for the time being. In his letter, Syria's foreign minister also acknowledged that such an exchange could not replace consultations between the Syrian National Authority and the DAT, while at the same time continuing to state that the exclusion of the DAT's lead technical expert was a condition for holding the 25th round of consultations. I urge the government of the Syrian Arab Republic
to cooperate with the OPCW Technical Secretariat as set out in paragraph 7 of Article 7 of the Chemical Weapons Convention, and to facilitate arrangements for the deployment of the DAT in accordance with paragraph 7 of Security Council Resolution 2118, including by allowing immediate and unfettered access for all personnel designated by the OPCW Secretariat as soon as possible. Full cooperation by the Syrian Arab Republic with the OPCW Technical Secretariat is essential to closing all outstanding issues. As has been stressed repeatedly, due to the identified gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies that remain unresolved, the Technical Secretariat continues to assess that, at this stage, the declaration submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic cannot be considered accurate and complete in accordance with the Chemical Weapons Convention. The OPCW Technical Secretariat remains fully committed to ensuring the full implementation by the Syrian Arab Republic of all its declaration requirements and to assisting Syria in fulfilling its obligations under the Convention. I take this opportunity to once again reiterate my full support for the integrity, professionalism, impartiality, objectivity, and independence of the work of the OPCW. Mr. President, I regret to inform the Council that the Syrian Arab Republic has yet to provide sufficient technical information or explanations that would enable the OPCW Technical Secretariat to close the issue related to the detection of a Schedule II chemical at the Barza facilities of the Scientific Studies and Research Center, or SSRC, in November 2018. Regarding the in-person meeting between the OPCW Director General and the Syrian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, I have been advised that the OPCW Technical Secretariat is still awaiting the Syrian Arab Republic's position on the latest version of the agenda. The proposed meeting will be an important opportunity to strengthen dialogue and cooperation between both parties. Further to previous updates to the Council, the OPCW fact-finding mission remains in the process of studying all available information related to allegations of the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. I have been advised that the FFM is continuing its engagements with the Syrian Arab Republic and other states parties with regard to a number of incidents and preparing for upcoming deployments. I understand that the Investigation and Identification Team, or IIT, continues its investigations into incidents in which the FFM has determined that chemical weapons were used or likely used in the Syrian Arab Republic. The IIT will issue further reports in due course. On the decision entitled Addressing the Possession and Use of Chemical Weapons by the Syrian Arab Republic, C25/Decision 9, adopted on 21st of April 2021, I have been informed that, unfortunately, the Syrian Arab Republic has not yet completed any of the measures stipulated in paragraph 5 of Decision EC94/Decision 2. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, the use of chemical weapons is a grave violation of international law and an affront to our shared humanity. We need to remain vigilant to ensure that these awful weapons are never used again and are eliminated, not only in Syria, but everywhere. Let me close by assuring you of the United Nations commitment to work with all member states to reinforce the norm against chemical weapons and to ensure that those responsible for their use are held to account. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Ms. Nakamitsu for her briefing. I now give the
Thank you, Excellency, government ministers, ambassadors, delegates, invited guests. I would like to thank the Permanent Mission of Brazil to the United States for the invitation to speak to the members, states, and for their presence also to listen. My name is Patrick, and I would like to tell you a little bit about myself, and I have some few recommendations that I think if we jointly come together, it will work. And I will request you to listen, which I know you will listen. In 2016, I was 15. I lived together with my family in a village far away from the Equatorial region of South Sudan. One day, we went to farm with my father. Unfortunately, an armed group came and adopted us. They took us far away from our home village. They tortured us, claiming that my father had carried or kept a gun. We are made to sleep in a pit filled with water after our necks, and they could not stop beating us. Because my father could not confess to something, he has nothing to say about it. They shot my father right in front of me. I was then told to join the force or I die. I cannot remember what I said. I only realized myself that my answer was yes when I found myself in the center of the camp, where hundreds of other children are staying. I could not eat for days and could not stop crying. In the barracks, there are over 2,000 people, with half of them were children, with many carrying guns. I was shocked and speechless. From the few I spoke to, some of the children joined the force because they were offered money and promised bigger positions. Some joined because their family were killed and had a reason of revenge. A 10-year-old boy that I spoke to, he told me the parents were mistreating him and he could not longer bear to stay with them. More younger children had wives. Even the adults as well married children of 14 and 15 years. In each attack I was forced to participate in, at least 5 children were injured or killed. There was no medical care. When you are sick, you either die or you survive. We drank water together with the animals. One day, an attack was launched in our barracks by the government forces. There was shooting everywhere. It was chaos. I ran. I narrowly escaped death. I kept going. I found my way to Uganda. I was registered in a BDVD refugee settlement. It took me 11 months trying to find my family. When I did, it was a day of joy, happiness, and sorrows. In 2018, I joined a Watch Child program called Boys More, a youth advocacy program. I went through trainings and ran a project on orphans and separated children together with other youth in my area. After the program, together with my friends, we set up our own community-based organization called Similar Ground, where we are helping hundreds of children to recover from stress and trauma. We are also running awareness campaigns with youth. It means a lot to us to help hundreds of children recover from stress and to help also other young people play a bigger role in the community. And this year, I have enrolled for my degree in human rights, peace, and humanitarian response. I wasted 3 years of my life trying to recover. Many children in my community are not able to recover so fast. Some don't recover at all. This is just one story. But we know there are thousands of children currently going through what I did. I've given a lot of thoughts during these years to what could have helped a child like me. Based on my experience and my work with children, I would like to present 4 recommendations to you. First, better quality reintegration that really understands the child. Children living armed groups need our full support to heal. They need medical care. They need to be reunited with their families and have opportunities to learn. Most importantly, communities need to be supported on how to welcome them. Children living armed forces are seen as a threat, and more work needs to be done to help people understand their needs and what they have been through. In addition to this, there is a gap in opportunities for children and young people living armed forces. They need to learn new skills and know how to put them into a good use. Secondly, we all know billions of dollars are given each year, but there's no greater sustainability. In humanitarian response, we give money, projects are implemented, then they are finished. National or international organizations need to collaborate better with the government, national and local organizations. So when projects are over, the community and the government can take over. I also request for a longer term funding is made available for projects and local organizations and community groups, including youth, because they can lead it. International organizations play a bigger and important role, but they all eventually leave when the time comes. Whereas we know our issues very well, and we can make activities more sustainable. Thirdly, more participation in decision making of people like me, children, and the youth. It is great I can speak here today. I'm very grateful for it. But one person, once a year, it's not enough. Young people affected by conflict need more opportunities to participate in policy and programming that is about them. Children affected by conflict will soon grow into adults, and many will be ready to be part of the solution. This will improve a situation in a longer term. There should be more opportunities for participation and empowerment of young people in the UN system and in the designing and leading response. Finally, greater accountability. There are a lot of laws that are already in place that are meant to support children affected by conflict. For example, the UN Committee on the Rights of a Child, the Geneva Convention, and many of the Security Council resolutions. So many countries have agreed to these laws, but they are not respected. They are not enforced as supposed to be at the country or a regional level. There should be more accountability for the promises and commitments made. There should be more effort to ensure that militaries, armed groups, local government, and anyone who meets a child in a conflict zone knows and understands these laws, while those who break them need to be held accountable. Last week, I sat down with friends and colleagues in BDVD, and I asked them what is that particular thing, the most important thing, as to request the Security Council. All of them agreed is that youth and children participation in the policy and programming. If it is something meant for the children and the youth, then let it be for them. I would like to finish by saying, thanking my friends and collaborators at Similar Ground to to Watch Child and other people and organizations that have helped me in my journey. And thank you, members of the UN School Council, for what you will do to better help children in conflict. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.